Hi, welcome to Africa's Competition Women series hosted by Econolicy Africa. My name is Oluyode Ogodele. I'm the lead author for Econolicy Africa. Econolicy Africa is an African-focused blog that brings you content on economics and the state of policy implementation on the African continent. Today, I have two amazing guests from the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission in Nigeria. And this promises to be a great discussion. Thank you, ladies, for tuning in. I'd like you to please introduce yourselves. I'll start with Florence.
Thank you very much, Toby, for having me. And it's such a pleasure to be here. Any opportunity to speak about what my interventions are in this very unique and new space, competition law, as it were, in Africa is really exciting. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I am a Chief Legal Officer with the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission. It's a mouthful. I'm deployed to the Office of the Chief Executive Officer and the Executive Vice Chairman of the Commission. I am currently more of a lead competition analyst at the Commission. I'm involved in several statutory investigations. I have led on behalf of management, have led the regulatory roadmap of the Commission with respect to our guidelines, our regulations. So, for example, the mergers, regulations, abuse of dominance, restrictive agreements, and name them. They're all published and they're all public information. I am also a focal person on behalf of the Commission to several development partners on TAD, OECD, ICN, ACF. I'm currently alternate chair of the Competition and Consumer Protection Committee with the ECOWAS Regional Competition Authority, the CCC. I'm the alternate chair, and I have a degree in law from the University of Leicester in the United Kingdom. And currently I just obtained another postgraduate diploma with King's College London in competition law. So yes, again, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Florence, for that very succinct introduction. Yemisi, can you kindly introduce yourself?
Oh, yes, please. So, hi, my name is Yemisi Oluyode. With everything Florence has said, I feel like, oh, should I even be introducing myself?
Yes, you should.
I work with the Mergers and Acquisitions Department. I also assist with in investigations in other competition-related areas, restrictive agreements, cartels, gun jumping. Also, I have a BA in History and International Relations. What else? Yeah, I think that's all.
Yeah. Thank you, ladies, for that introduction. So before I get into the questions, I'd like to issue a disclaimer that the views and opinions we express henceforth are ours, and they do not represent the official position of the organizations that we're employed by. So my first question for you ladies, to kind of kick off this discussion, is about, how young Nigeria's competition authority is. So the FCCPC Act was enacted in 2018, compared to other countries like South Africa from 1998 having a competition authority. How has the FCCPC prioritized competition enforcement to make the most impact for the Nigerian people? Florence, would you like to? Yes.
Well, let me say, and you're right, Toby, historically, Nigeria is just coming into the competition space. By way of institutional history, the FCCPC was once the Consumer Protection Council, and so we focused more on consumer protection. However, in 2019, we have metamorphosed into a Consumer Protection and Competition Commission with the additional competition mandate. And so with respect to impact, what the management decided to do at the time was prioritize the markets in the sense that we wanted to limit the disruptions in the market. So as Yemisi might tell you, we created a joint desk with respect to merger analysis with the then Security and Exchange Commission. And just like I said in my introduction, we've then created this regulatory roadmap where we have prioritized advocacy so that consumers and businesses and all market players understand their role, their responsibilities, and their rights in that space. With respect to enforcement, we took a little bit of a back seat and prioritized advocacy because we wanted to make sure that people were aware that there's a new sheriff in town. We do understand that this is somewhat of a new area of law that Nigeria was not used to. I mean, this is the first time that Nigeria is seeing competition law as robust as we have it now in the country. And so we're now only beginning to, carry out more enforcement activities, as you would notice as time goes on. But with more specifically on impact, the FCCPC would say that between the 4 years that we have come on board competition-wise, we have more businesses filing merger applications with the Commission, understanding the tools of analysis and how we generally perceive the economic aspects of mergers. But that's not just mergers. We are also seeing more assertive consumers who know, oh, maybe this conduct is somewhat of an unfair business practice. And so with respect to price gouging, we've had to bring a number of businesses to book. And you see that link between competition and consumer protection when we talk about price gouging. So we've done a lot of work with respect to price gouging. We've done a lot of work with respect to advocacy. We've done a lot of work with trying to enforce in the digital space. But we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, it's always a long way to go with competition issues. Yemisi, would you like to add to that question?
Yes, but like she rightly said, we started off the joint desk table, and I think from the enforcement point of view, I think the like she said again, the Commission has decided to put advocacy first before we bring in the stake. And then the idea with the joint desk table was to ease into the market and not just like there's a new sheriff in town and change everything. So for example, it took a while before we brought in our regulations. We still allowed the businesses to still take use the SEC rules as they were used to before. And like she said, with every other part, restrictive agreements, price gouging, and cartel investigations, we've just taken it one at a time. We're not going into the market full force. We decided to publish our leniency rules, our cooperation and assistance rules, just to allow more people come in and not to just go into the market like full force and just take it easy and let the market understand the new sheriff in town, basically.
Yeah, thank you for your responses. And you touched on something very important on advocacy. Advocacy is big for competition enforcement. And my second question is, I know the FCCPC prioritizes sensitizing consumers to their rights and responsibilities and also making businesses aware of their legal obligations, that, competition-wise and also consumer protection. So how can you specifically say how the sensitization is done for consumers and also to businesses by the FCCPC?
Let me start by saying, should I
go
ahead?
ahead? Start. Yeah.
Okay, so let me just start by saying that every tool that the Commission employs is an opportunity for advocacy. Even when we enforce, we use a lot of press releases, we engage the media, we have an annual media conference every year where we educate the people who carry out the information. But besides that, the Commission's website is a library of information as well. So we utilize social media, our websites, annual media chats, even our regulations, our research materials. We usually have regulations, then we have guidelines, then we have guidance notes, just to make sure that, you know, if there's any lacuna or loophole, we plug it. So yes, advocacy, like I said, is key for us. We have engaged the judiciary, we've engaged the National Assembly, we've engaged is it the fourth realm, the journalists are called. So yes, we take advantage of every opportunity that we have to send the message out there and put people at a more informed stead.
Yemisi, thank you, Florence. Yemisi, would you like to also add to the advocacy sensitization tools?
I mean, I think she has said it all. Stakeholders engagement. Yes, she said it all, actually.
Okay, so thank you, Yemisi. So I'll move to our third question, and it's on mergers. And we know in competition enforcement, mergers in some cases may enhance, productive, allocative, or dynamic efficiencies, and they may not present competition issues. But there are also cases where certain mergers will raise red flags and present competition concerns. And those are the kind of mergers that competition authorities like the FCCPC are concerned about. So I'll start with EMSC. What factors will the FCCPC normally consider in identifying those mergers that raise competition concerns?
Thank you, Toby. So for the Mergers and Acquisitions Department in the FCCPC, we basically look out for few things. I would say market concentration, which is one of them. Just ensuring that once there's a high concentration in the market, there's already suspicion of reduced competition in the market. We look at barriers to entry to ensure that there's ease to enter the market and compete effectively. We also look at countervailing buyer power. So we're saying, do we have a consumer or a consumer that can change the effect or curtail or offset the effect of any unilateral increase in price in the market, or ensure that they get better goods or services. For vertical mergers, we check for the vertical integration. So we're trying to see, is there any way that businesses for competitors can be foreclosed. Also importantly, like you said, we also look out for efficiencies. So we're seeing, do the efficiencies outweigh the competition issues that we've seen? Maybe there are barriers to entry, there's high concentration in the market. We're trying to be sure, okay, are they efficiencies? And we also look at failing firm defense. So we're trying to also ensure, which is part of public interest, to ensure that, okay, if there's nobody to buy this business and it fails, what's the plan? What will happen to the employees? So these are just a few things we concentrate on after doing a proper market definition. We've done a proper market definition. We have our market share, so we're checking using the concentration ratio formula to ensure that the market there's no opportunity for coordination or any unilateral effect, foreclosure in the market, basically. Those are the things we look out for.
Thank you, Yemisi. Florence, would you like to add to that question, or do you think Yemisi has covered all the bases?
I think Yemisi has covered all the basics. Those challenging situations are rare. And yes, these are the usual tools that we use. And I like the fact that she mentioned public interest. We're an agency of government responsible to a large extent about how the economy operates. And so things like employment, technological transfers, innovations, are things that we should be generally interested in because we want the economy to flourish. Small and medium scale enterprises, is it easy for them? Is it timely for them? Is there a likelihood that it can come into the space with your merger analysis? And, you know, if it's an impossible situation, what's the divestment situation like? And so we utilize tools like even giving you a conditional approval and giving you time to look inwards and adjust your behavior or, you know, divest a part of the business. So I think she did a phenomenal job with her response, yes.
Yeah, I think she did too. Thank you, ladies. So I'll move to the fourth question. And Yemisi mentioned something about market concentration. So there's some evidence of increasing market power. You know, it's global, but even also specifically on the African continent. And this, like you said, affects the public interest in terms of small and medium enterprises, the ability to enter the market, to expand their businesses. So looking at Africa as a continent, we have various developmental challenges. And as a competition enforcer, would you say that there's a moral obligation for African markets to be competitive? Florence, you can have a go.
Yeah. I think my answer, I mean, the short answer is definitely a yes, and the long answer will still be a yes. And I don't think that this is unique to Africa by itself. We definitely need competition regimes across board, and you can see it in other countries. Nigeria just happens to be late to the party. But with all that is going on, we certainly need it because we're seeing a lot of inflation in across board around the world, and you know that how that affects prices. And so we're seeing that our markets are no longer as transparent as before. Now we're seeing different school of thoughts where someone is saying now that markets are not as predictable, collusion is now more difficult. But there's another school of thought that says now that things are a bit more difficult, businesses have a higher incentive to collaborate. And so definitely the role of a competition authority has become even more important. And I'll give you an example of one of the things that the Commission did in the COVID peak periods. We released a guideline that allowed businesses, and you know our sanitizers at the time made up of 80 to 90% of alcohol, and you know everyone there's this sit-at-home order, and so we wanted to make sure that businesses could still operate in such a difficult climate, and so we released guidelines allowing businesses to collaborate and ensuring that they didn't have to go through the long process of getting an approval for exemption. So we niched out certain products and certain businesses, and we said, if you want to collaborate, of course, you're allowed to do that. So that's the sort of interventions that competition does in critical times like this. We allow for certain collaborations. We allow for businesses, instead of a business to fail and then leave the market and risk more job losses, less taxes to the economy, less capital and innovative means of doing things, would rather allow businesses to come together. So whether it's a merger, whether it's some kind of agreement that would ordinarily have been considered restrictive, we allow businesses to come in together. And so these are the interventions that a competition authority can make to make sure that the market is still in the midst of such a difficult time, we can bring in some kind of solace to the economy.
Yeah, thank you for that response, Florence. Yemisi, is there a moral obligation for African markets to be competitive?
Yes, like Florence said, yes, I think so. Because I have this newfound interest in sustainable development, especially from the sustainable development point of view. It's coming to a point where a competitive market promotes an innovative and sustainable environment. With competition, you can have more environmental friendly, responsibility, and you have technological friendly innovations coming up, because especially with the wake, we just have 6 years to go for us to fulfill the SDGs, and there are a lot of conversations on how sustainable development and competition law will have to work hand in hand. And it's like, we know it's time for Africa to come on board. But I will also say, it's always important to also know that the concept of competition, it's not a one size fits all. I hope African countries also realize that you don't just take or adopt everything that as they've seen. And like Florence said, there was a time where we had the COVID pandemic situation. We're not just strict and say, we have this law, it has to be this way. But because we have a diverse culturally diverse, we have different economy. It's just better to tailor competition as it suits your economy and culture, I think. So.
Thank you, Yemisi. And I think that's a lovely segue to my next question about tailoring your competition regimes to what works for your markets. And there's a new bigger sheriff in town called AFTA's Competition Authority. That's the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. So it's envisaged, it's not been done yet, and there's the hope of having this supranational body to regulate competition on the continent. And I'm sure you ladies may have heard about it. I'm wondering what your initial reactions to having this big sheriff, and what do you think should be the first point of call for the supranational competition authority in Africa? Florence, you can start off.
Okay, my initial reaction is exciting, very happy. We are going to find it easier to move from place to place within Africa. Our goods are going to come in and out easily at little or no tariff. And so exciting times. We're creating the largest trade bloc in the world, of course. Anyone should welcome that. But then again, there are challenges ahead of us. Whether you like it or not, now anti-competitive conduct is now cross-border. And with or without the African Continental Free Trade, it is cross-border. I mean, the exciting thing now is we will now have more businesses learning from the innovation implemented in one country, and we're able to transport that to other countries. But let's be frank, as much as cartels are moving, abuse of dominance will move, restrictive agreements, all these concerns are raised. The real issue is implementation. We are at a stage where we're just coming into the table. Nigeria is one of the biggest economies in Africa, and we have only just come up with a competition authority. So you can imagine how much more other countries, and even those countries that have, we are different developmental stages. And Nigeria has just come in 2019. South Africa has been there. COMESA just celebrated how many years? And so you can understand there are different developmental stages regionally and country-wise. And so the other challenges that leads to is, how are we going to integrate? We have several thresholds in mergers. For example, even with the legal screens when it comes to abuse of dominance and restrictive agreements, the thresholds are different. What we call a public interest in Nigeria may not be a public interest in South Africa. We are very unique in our challenges. And so in terms of next steps, I would like to see implementation with respect to integration. How are we going to move? We're saying there's free movement of people, goods, and services. But our aviation is hard. Rail is hard. Ships, difficult. And so it's easier for me to get to London than to get to Gambia, for example. So think about it. How is that free movement really going to happen with these infrastructural challenges? And so for me, I would like to see Africa look inwards and consider more collaboration. Competition authorities need to come together. We need to identify these peculiarities. We need to consider them, and we need to harmonize them.
Thanks for that response. Very holistic, Florence. Yemisi, your initial reactions to having a supranational competition authority for the continent. Are you excited? Are you as excited as Florence is?
No. My first reaction to it was, oh my God. How would they deal with the regional competition authorities? I think that was my own major concern, not even the and maybe a bit on legal framework of other countries. So, for example, like Florence had said, threshold issues, which I know, okay, they can agree on the general Africa-wide threshold. But example is we have in Nigeria the BOFIA, where it says banks and other financial institutions are not regulated competition-wise and consumer protection-wise under the FCCPA. So the question really is, if there's going to be a supranational body, how would they handle this? So if there's a bank that is going to cut across, what's the plan? Because every other nation, apart from Nigeria, different other country has their own legal framework. And especially for the big guys, the regional bodies, I don't know what the plan is. Hopefully, Florence is really part of the discussions and negotiations on the African Free Trade Agreement. But for me, I'm just layman. I don't really know much. I'm just thinking, would there be this three-tier supernatural, the regional, then Africa-wide, the national? What's the plan? For a lot of competition authority, mergers and acquisition or competition dealings are a way of are a resource. How do I explain this? It's how they cooping money into their different authorities. So would there be a situation where you would take this out, take it away from them? Oh, the regional competition authority will handle this. How would there be a percentage of the fees, processing fees or fines that will come to the national authority, or the little regional, sub-regional authorities like COMESA, ECA, and the rest? So I think for me, the first point of call for the authority is public awareness, maybe capacity building for it's going to be big. You need a lot of people on board. You're going to be handling how many 52 countries. You need enough hands. It's not small, basically. And I think it would be good if they begin to publish once they start. I don't know if the implementation has really started. Guidelines. What's the plan? How would companies and businesses adjust? So I think basically public awareness. That's what I think.
Yeah, thanks for your response, Yemisi. So my final question for you ladies, we're moving on to softer things. Are there things that, are you happy? So are there things women should be prepared for, or just generally when coming into the competition field? And what helps you as an individual navigate the competition terrain? Because it's not an easy one. I mean, from our discussion, you need all this technical expertise. There's a lot of work to be done. So what helps you prosper in the field of competition? Florence, you can kick off, and then, Yemisi can add.
I'd say the the only response I have is really interest and passion. And for women, I think that this is a very new space to us in Africa, and you can now take advantage of that opportunity. You need to develop yourself, your capacity. You need to find out what the niche is for you, and integrate, network, and open up to those conversations. So for me, I'll take a leaf from what Yemisi said. There are challenges now, with the world, with Africa opening up and becoming one of the largest trading blocs. And now there's a lot of integration concerns and the movement that's going to happen. There's no better time but now for the women. And I would suggest that you develop your capacity, you look out for where that niche would be for you and plug in. Then again, the real answer is really passion and interest in these key concerns, and find out how you can be a solution bringer into that space.
Yeah, I like that phrase, solution bringer. I have so many phrases that I love from this conversation, actually. I should have a phrase book. Yemisi, so for you, what helps you navigate this terrain? Any general advice for women looking to come into the competition space?
Basically, I think mostly what Florence has said, I think it is interest and passion. Like for my introduction, you see, I finished with, I have my degree in history and international relations. I'm not an economist, I'm not a lawyer, but it's just finding a way to distinguish yourself by continuous learning, opening yourself to be open-minded, ready to learn, listen to people, like my senior colleague, Florence. Listen, she's the lawyer, she has a diploma in competition law. So it's just paying attention. Once you have the passion, keep reading. There's always something to read on. There's always another part to it. There's, even with the whole competition that is new, there's a segment, there are different segments to it. Like I said, there's conversation on sustainable development and antitrust now. There are different sides to it. You can quickly pick a niche and grow up the ladder. And yeah, so I think I really agree with all that Florence said. That's it. And I would like to say that even the commission here is almost some people say, is it the Women Affairs Ministry? Because we have a lot of women everywhere.
Well, that's a good thing.
Yes, women, my department, for example, mergers and acquisitions, I think we only have 2 men in the department, every other person women. So it's yeah, I think the sky is just the starting point for women. I think we can do it. Yay.
Thank you, Yemisi, for your enthusiasm. And I like what you said about continuous learning. And I think this is the case for any field of study. Those that remain relevant and move up in their careers are those that continue to learn about the various evolving trends in their fields. So thank you, ladies. It was a very interesting conversation. We've come to the end of it, and you were amazing discussants. I'm hoping that anyone that watches this video or reads about it will be inspired and will really understand what enforcement in Nigerian markets is about. Thank you very much for joining me for this.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Toby, for having us.